Freakonomics.
One piece of Freakonomics is incentives, and that's something that economics and Freakonomics intimately share. It's the idea that incentives matter incredibly to the world understanding of the world. So whenever I approach a problem, the first thing I think is, what are the incentives of everybody involved? And that's naturally what any economist would do when faced with an issue. To me, in fact, the financial incentives are often the weakest ones that operate. It's the social pressure. It's the idea that people won't like me or I won't like myself if I do something, which is far more powerful than shifting a few bucks around one direction or another.
Yeah, and I think that's something that most people don't assume. When they think of economists or economics, they think it's all about financial incentives, whereas it turns out that they're not the weakest, but it depends. And as the dollars get larger, they become incredibly strong, but especially where the stakes are small.
Yeah, a good example of an incentive which is not financial, and indeed a case where financial incentives get in the way of other kinds of incentives, comes out of a study done by some economists about daycare.
So in Israel, at these daycare centers, it turns out that parents were picking up their kids late and nobody liked it. So they decided to have a little fine, which an economist would probably think is exactly the right thing to do. But it can't be too big a fine because you don't want to be like a jerk and make all the parents mad. So it was like $3 a day, the fine. And it turns out that the fine didn't work at all. In fact, it backfired because the fine was small enough so that parents could actually buy off their guilt about not showing up on time.
Before the financial penalty, you had a lot of guilt. Right? You came late, you knew that you were putting hardship onto the people who worked at the daycare, and then they put a price on it. And said, well, the price to us is it really costs us $3 worth of hardship. And now it becomes just a transaction. I'm sitting at Starbucks and I'm thinking, man, I'm enjoying this coffee. It's worth $3 for me to finish this off, have a cigarette, not have to worry about picking up my kids. And I don't have to feel bad about it, because now that we put a price on it, it's not really about morality anymore. It's just about a financial transaction. Now, the interesting thing about the daycare is, after they put in the fine, and the parents showed up later and later, they said, well, we got to get rid of the fine. Okay? And they got rid of the fine, and then the parents came even later still, because now, not only did they not have to pay the financial penalty, they knew that the daycare only cared a few bucks about it, and so they were trapped in the worst of all worlds.
Right, that's the problem. If you put too low a price on something, so the daycare center is saying to the parents, if you're late by 15 minutes or an hour or whatever, it's worth $3. And the parents say, well, that's not very much, so your time must not be very valuable, and my time is surely more valuable than yours, so I'm going to finish up my tennis game, and you can keep taking... And actually, if you calculate the fine of the Israeli daycare centers, it was much less per hour than the parents were already paying for the daycare, so it was actually prorated to be cheaper. So you could actually just say, hey, keep my kids till midnight. It's a great babysitting service.